Story 1. Last time, I offered them iced tea, and we all sat on the front porch. I told them I was not going to talk about God, but they looked tired and thirsty. In Central Florida, it was 90 degrees. We had a nice visit and talked about our dogs. Story 2. They showed up today, two cheerful women wanting to share the good news. I thought it was Amazon, but no. I lost my Hearthstone game for nothing. Story 3. I tell them I was disfellowshipped, and they never return again. Works like a charm. I am recorded as never to visit. Story 4. As a former Jehovah's Witness, do not answer calls. If you do answer, ask to be put on the do not call list. If pressured, say you support Satan. If you want to try to help someone leave the cult, ask them questions. Be aware this is like signing up for a newsletter, and they will return. However, you could save someone's life in a controlling cult. Story 5. I have a sign on my door that says, "No soliciting. For real, you are not invited. Do not knock. Go away. If anyone knocks despite the sign, I will not be nice." Story 6. Talk to them. I feel sorry that they were raised in families and churches where they have to sacrifice so much of themselves for it. Story 7. Tell them I used to be one but quit. They are forbidden to reconvert people who left, and this is true. Story 8. Oh, the joys of living in a secure building. They require a key fob to get through 2 doors before reaching mine. In my old place, they sent young teenage girls to do this. I can't imagine there weren't some problems. My ex gave them a lecture about it and provided her phone number in case the parents wanted to discuss it. It is a nice neighborhood, but there are creeps everywhere. Story 9. I am an apostate. I want to get high and talk about all of the Bible's contradictions. Let me tell you all about my journey of leaving your religion because I learned too much about it. They generally freak out because they are not allowed to contact people who have deconstructed their beliefs. Story 10. I always walk around the house naked or wearing a Donald Duck costume, so I just open the door in whatever I am wearing or not wearing. Story 11. They are not around where I live. I am in the most godless region of the planet. The majority within a 100-kilometer radius around me are non-religious, and most of the religious people are immigrants. Story 12. Put on your coat and say you were just on your way out to donate blood because a good friend or family member was just in an accident and needs blood. Story 13. I live in a remote area. If a Jehovah's Witness found my house, the least I could do is invite them in for a glass of lemonade. Story 14. I greet them, let them introduce themselves, and when they ask if I want to hear their message, I tell them I am not interested and wish them a good day. If they are aggressive, I say things like, Jesus preached the golden rule. It was Paul who preached religion. And I do not trust anyone who tries to tell me they know what will happen after we die. Story 15. Just say, not interested. That's all you have to do. Even the most devout are not as pushy as they used to be. Story 16. Same thing I do with anyone else that is not Uber Eats or Amazon. Hide, pretend I am not home, and sneak a peek from a window. Story 17. Jehovah's Witnesses are not that bad. I assume they know the rejection rate is probably 99% going into it, so they are fine with doing their part to spread the word. The pest control, solar panel, and True Green workers are the ones who apparently have to be told 3 distinct times that I am not interested before they walk off in a huff. Story 18. I give them about a minute or 2. Then I say I am happy with my church situation as it is. My church situation includes going to an actual church about once every 10 years. I am happy with that, but don't need to share that detail. They need to talk to many people every month. The people knocking on doors are likely coming from difficult situations, and the church is helping them get it together. So, I see it as allowing them their moment to make contact. My grandmother lived alone and enjoyed company. She made arrangements for those who needed to give their talk to come at a certain time. They met their minimum requirement and then stayed for lunch, having conversations with her without more church discussions. Each time they came, there would be at least one regular visitor and usually one new person. So, egg salad sandwiches on pumpernickel bread, potato salad, and Coke in a glass with ice cubes. followed by banana bread with chocolate chips for dessert. Story 19. Tell them they killed my friend when they would not allow her to have a blood transfusion during childbirth. Then close the door. Story 20. One time I was not at home and Jehovah's Witnesses left a copy of the Watchtower on my door. That issue had an article about not believing the media because just because something is written down does not make it true. I was very sad that I missed them. I imagine it would have been a fun conversation. Story 21. If you say that you used to be a member but have been removed from the congregation or gone through disfellowship, they are not allowed to talk to you and will quickly leave. Story 22. My wife made a door plaque that states we will not vote for your politician. The doorbell and I get irritable. Please take your God and leave. We found Satan. We never get solicitors now. Story 23. Do not answer. It is simple. Everyone has or should have a doorbell camera, so if you are not expecting anyone, you can simply check and see who is there. Even if you open the curtains to check and they see you, still do not answer. Ignore them. Story 24. Politely tell them I am not interested. I do not have a creative fiction answer or any way to make them feel bad or negatively impact their day. Story 25. I always answer the door with a can of beer just to throw people off. It is an upper-middle-class neighborhood, but giving the first impression that I am trashy always leaves solicitors confused. Story 26. They showed up and their knocking woke me up. I looked really sick with puffy, reddish eyes and messy hair. They asked me if I was sick, and I said yes. They left. Now, I pretend to be sick every time. Story 27. Ignore. We have not received them in a few years, but in the past, the mothers on my block would call and warn each other to close the blinds and not answer the door. Story 28. I will usually start with, if your nonsense were so terrific, I would be knocking on your door. Now go away, or I shall taunt you a second time. Story 29. I had a college psychology professor 35 years ago. She had the best Jehovah's Witness story. Every Saturday morning at about 8 a.m., there was a knock on the door. The professor was the dorm mother for a dormitory in the early 1970s. Many older students and some Vietnam War veterans lived there. Many of them had drunk heavily the night before, and the professor had to open the door. The Jehovah's Witnesses would always ask if the professor had accepted the Lamb of God. This continued for a few weeks until the professor had a great idea. The witnesses asked, "Have you accepted the Lamb of God?" The professor responded, "Yes. I ate him last night." The Jehovah's Witnesses turned around and never came back. Story 30. Ah, come on. Jehovah's Witnesses are nothing to be scared of. Saying hello is not going to hurt you. You are not going to get converted against your will or anything. Story 31. Be as polite as I can and thank them for being good people, but I am not interested in changing my lifestyle. They are kind and only trying to spread love. They are the most harmless religious group on the planet. Keep them safe and treat them kindly. Story 32. When I got married, we were gifted a papal blessing of our marriage. I keep it hung right next to the door, and it is visible from the security door. I just point to it and say no thanks. It works for all religious door knockers. Story 33. A friend of mine, a former Jehovah's Witness, suggested telling these people that you have been disfellowshipped. She said that they will not be able to leave fast enough. Story 34. I notify them that I am a pagan, Wiccan actually, and clearly display my blessed be tattoo that encompasses a pentagram and half moons. Then I ask them to look up the Epics of Gilgamesh, which predates the Bible by 1,000 years and depicts stories similar to the biblical ones. Story 35. There are a variety of stories and responses in this thread. Over many decades, I have had every type come to my door, from the nice and polite to the nasty and accusatory. Nothing conveys the love of Christ better than an angry person declaring that you are condemned to eternal damnation. Story 36. Unfortunately, I have learned that you cannot even be kind and listen or talk to them. I used to say, "I have a church of my own, thank you though," and I would take the pamphlet. Things only spiraled. At one point, they kept sending this boy to the house. He looked like he was about 10 years old. I could tell they were targeting me. I finally started refusing to take the pamphlet and only said that I am not interested. I shut the door with no additional kindness. I was not raised that way and I hate to do it, but that is what we have to do now. My mother used to be kind and chat with them, and one particular lady started pushing hard to get her to come to the temple. My mother had to say no, and it created bad feelings. Story 37. I saw a Jehovah's Witness meeting hall with a gate at the driveway preventing you from coming to the door. Oh, the irony. Story 38. Once you mention how their donated money is being used to pay lawyers in child sexual abuse cases, they quickly lose interest in the conversation. Bonus points if you add that these are the same lawyers used by the Catholic Church. Story 39. I'm not sure if they were part of the Jehovah's Witnesses church or not, but one time a woman and her son, probably around 13 years old, showed up. They said they wanted to share some good news and asked if they could come in. She was quite attractive. I told her that my wife and I have a church home. She kept insisting that they come in. Finally, I told her that if she wanted to come back alone in a couple of hours when my wife was home, we could all have some good fun, and that her son would probably get bored because we didn't have anything to entertain him while he waited alone in the living room. She was surprised but got the hint and left. Story 40. My dad told them we were violent atheists when they showed up the first time at the house we had moved into. I think we were put on a banned list because they never came back. That was more than 20 years ago. Another group came knocking when I was in college and home alone in the early 2000s. I opened the main door but left the storm door closed and locked, then let my pit bull bark loudly at them while peeking just over the bottom of the window. They just put the brochure on the porch and left. The worst the dog would have done was knock them down and give them kisses, but her big head and loud bark were intimidating. We went on their banned list as well. No one has bothered us in years. We do live quite a bit out in the country, so that helps. They probably figure everyone out here in this part of the county has found God, so they do not need to recruit anymore. Story 41. We do not answer the door immediately. We have a security camera, so we check it first when someone is knocking. There is no doorbell because it has been broken since we moved in, and we have not fixed it. Story 42. Answer. Tell them I am not interested. Ask them what part of no was so hard to understand. Close the door in their face. Story 43. Reading the comments. Most of you are rude and disrespectful. Think very carefully about how you would feel if that was your grandmother being treated like that. I don't care what religion you are. If you attack, verbally abuse, or set your dogs on someone who knocks on your door, you deserve to have unpleasant things happen to you. Whatever happened to basic courtesy and manners? Knocking on someone's door to have a conversation is not a crime. Basic manners mean greetings, saying not interested, and wishing a nice day. Basic manners also include not answering the door. Less than 30 seconds wasted, and no one has to feel threatened. It is a totally different story if they start hunting for you or trespassing on your yard, but legally speaking, everyone has a right to access your front door without getting attacked. Story 44. I have a sticker by my door that says, I am not interested. Before I had the sticker, they visited me once, and I decided to be very polite. I told them I was not interested and wished them a nice day. They thanked me and left. These people truly believe they are doing the right thing, and I do not think there is a reason to be rude to them. If they refuse to leave, I would be less polite but still respectful. Story 45. Answer the door wearing nothing but a smile. Additionally, to be creative, you can add some Lucifer horns. Story 46. I tell them, oh, you guys are a bit early for the group meeting, but I will warm up the women while you change into the outfit. Story 47. How dare you try to convert me on my Sabbath? You of all people should know better. I hope you are ashamed. Story 48. 86. The pants. Cover myself in streaks of ketchup. Grab a butcher knife. Invite them in to talk over tartare. Story 49. They should really be careful doing that. People do not always have the best intentions for others and vice versa. No offense. Story 50. Just happened this morning. I was out front weeding. I did what I always do. I told them I am Jewish and to stop bothering me. I am not friendly but not rude. I do not see them for a couple of months and then they try again. I have been in this house for 6 years and it has always been like this. Story 51. I had to walk outside in my birthday suit with a cup of coffee to invite them in for a chat to finally stop the knocking. Story 52. I have no soliciting signs, but if I did not, I would invite them in and tell them that I would listen to what they had to say as long as they listened to what I had to say. If they agreed, I would educate them on the Bible with scripture and my knowledge of Jesus. Story 53. My husband once mentioned his deceased sister, who was a Jehovah's Witness. They left after that. He largely blamed them. Story 54. A long time ago, I remember my father getting into a fight with a man who tried to talk to him about religion while my father was cutting the grass. I remember my father chasing the man around with our push mower. The man was screaming for help, and my mother was just laughing. It is one of my first memories of life. I love it. Story 55. Invite them in for a chat and a cup of tea. I am somewhat knowledgeable in the Bible and enjoy discussing it with them a little. Story 56. I have only ever had one of them knock on my door, which was one of the strangest encounters I have ever experienced. They basically just said they were not interested. Story 57. Years ago, they came in the middle of the day when I was on the night shift in very rural England. Everyone who knows us knows that you don't ring the doorbell. You knock on the door. We had 2 large male dogs that would fight over the right to protect the house if the doorbell rang. I grabbed the snarling dogs by their collars in one hand and opened the door with the other. Is this a bad time to call? Yes. I let the dogs run into the yard, still snapping and snarling at each other. You never saw 2 little old ladies run to their car faster. That property is still on their do not call list over 40 years later. Story 58. What I always do is understand that their religion requires witnessing and be very polite. I explain that I am an atheist, take their magazine, and promise to read it. Then I go about my day after checking the magazine in the bin. Story 59. I do not answer. I can see through the blinds on my front door from the top of the stairs. The only people I answer the door for are children doing bottle drives for their schools. Story 60. My ex-mother-in-law would cheerfully invite them in and strategically seat them in the living room in chairs farthest from the door. She would serve tea and cookies and then try to convert them to Catholicism. They stopped knocking after that. My father simply posted a "We Give Blood" sticker on the door, which also worked. Story 61. They rarely do, but when they do, I am generally nice. Then I think about how much people lament how neighborhoods are not friendly anymore and laugh at the hypocrisy. Funny story though, I knew a man who was a very born-again Christian. He invited them in and scheduled sessions with them. He eventually convinced them to switch over to Christianity. Story 62. Many years ago, my then-husband answered the door to a Jehovah's Witness with a running chainsaw. Our log home was still under construction. The Jehovah's Witness left quite quickly. Story 63. I have a no soliciting sign on my door. The last time someone knocked, I answered in my underwear. I have not heard from them since. Story 64. Meet them at the door wearing only an apron. Hold a cleaver in one hand and a chicken or a bloody turkey dangling in the other. Ask if they happen to be a virgin, then grin like a Cheshire cat. Story 65. I just told them that God said a eunuch will have a name in heaven greater than those who have children, as stated in Isaiah chapter 56. Verses 4 to 5. The Bible also says that those who marry become worldly, according to 1 Corinthians chapter 7, verses 32 to 33. The New Testament further states that it is not good to marry, as found in Matthew chapter 19, verse 10, and encourages walking away from having families to inherit treasure in heaven, mentioned in Matthew chapter 19, verse 29. Story 66. I opened the door, let them ask their ridiculous questions, then slammed the door in their face without saying a word. I have not seen them since. Story 67. Same thing I do when anyone comes to the door at any time. Pull up the blind, look, close the blind, and go back to whatever I was doing. Story 68. We have a no solicitor sign on the door. For anyone who disregards it and repeatedly knocks, they either get the good cop or the bad cop. If the former lingers too long at the door, the bad cop intervenes. The bad cop is blunt and to the point. Still, they keep coming. Story 69. I tell them, your religion ruined my life and any hope I had of having a normal childhood or a family that loved me. This is a completely accurate statement. Story 70. Several things. If you wish to chat with them, let them know right away that you are an apostate. They leave quickly. Put a sign on your door that says, no soliciting. We are apostates. Put a sign on the door that says, this home is full of apostates. They may remove your home address from their visit list. Story 71. I answer the door. Just before they start to speak, I point my index finger to indicate, wait a minute, then close the door. Story 72. What I did once was turn on adult content on the television. I took off my shirt and grabbed a beer. When I answered the door, they asked if I had heard the word of the Lord. I told them I was watching adult content and drinking beer, and asked if they wanted to join me. They were visibly shaken and left. They never knocked on my door again. Story 73. I have never had it happen, but I hear it is good to show them kindness when they do because they are told how evil the world outside their religion is. Being mean to them only confirms that and forces them in deeper. This may have been about members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Story 74. They don't. It is probably the styrofoam goat head with the pentagram. My husband put it up one Halloween and never took it down. Story 75. Most of them have been terrified of my dog and just hand over a pamphlet before running away. For the record, I have only owned Cocker Spaniel and Cavalier King Charles Spaniel mixes. Story 76. One time, I was leaving my house and found them in my garage. I had left the doors open because my neighbor had asked to borrow some yard tools. I was freaked out and told them they were in my house, since the garage is attached, and that they needed to leave immediately. They tried to do their spiel, but I stopped them and said that once they entered my house without my consent, they forfeited any right to my time. They were respectful and polite and left when I asked, but I felt violated that they had entered my home instead of going to the front door. Story 77. This happened to me when I was a college student. I just said, wait a minute, and went back into the apartment. I found my roommate and said, there is someone at the door for you. We did not see the roommate again for 30 minutes. Story 78. The gentle way is to answer the door, thank them for their time, and tell them that your soul is already spoken for. If you are not feeling particularly charitable, you muss up your hair, shift to your crazy face, open the door, and then ask them if they accept the Lord Satan as their evil master. Story 79. I have a no solicitation sign and do not like unexpected visitors. I especially do not want anyone trying to convert me on my private time and property. If anyone rings my doorbell without prior invitation, I ignore it. I just pretend I am not home. Story 80. Talk to them about the great work the Satanic Temple is doing, and invite them to discuss the 7 tenets. Story 81. Doorbell cameras are excellent. I can tell visitors no thanks or simply ignore them without having to get up from the couch. Story 82. Tell them you already attend a different church, temple, or synagogue. Take their Watchtower magazine and thank the sisters. Story 83. I've just ignored them before. One time I did listen to their spiel though because one member of the group was a mid-20s blonde who was very attractive. Story 84. It depends on my mood and if I want to mess with someone, but I usually answer and try to waste as much of their time as possible. They eventually get tired and do not come back until next year. Story 85. I never answer the door unless it is someone I recognize or am expecting. I might question them through my video doorbell, but only occasionally. Story 86. If you own the property, update it so you can turn the doorbell off when you do not want to hear from anyone. Story 87. I live in a mobile home park. They are not allowed on our property. I would call the non-emergency line and have them trespassed. Story 88. I found that telling them you have a different book of scripture other than the Bible they have is pretty effective. They tend to leave quickly. Story 89. When I was married to my ex, I called her to talk to them. She could never tell anyone to go away. The first time it lasted 45 minutes. I wonder why we are no longer married. Story 90. Creep up to the door quietly and look through the peephole. Then creep back to whatever I was doing before. Yes, I am a coward. Story 91. I had a lovely conversation with them last time they knocked on my door, during which I questioned everything they said and briefly explained evolution. It has been a year and a half, and they have not been back, so I wonder if they have marked us as a lost cause. If they ever do come back and I have time, I will do the same thing. I love having these conversations delving into people's beliefs, and if you have knocked on my door about them, I do not feel the least bit bad about questioning any and all of them. Story 92. I talk to them very respectfully. I am a huge atheist, so I know they are not changing my mind. It is usually only a 5 to 10 minute interaction, and I am more than willing to tell them why I am an atheist. I explain I have read the Bible. The God in the Bible is unkind and encourages killing in the Old Testament. The New Testament is a bit better, and I do wish the world were more compassionate toward helping the poor, the elderly, and welcoming immigrants to this country. I am a liberal. I also explain I just cannot support a God who allows children to have cancer or be abused. They try to explain why that happens, but I dismiss it, saying I have heard all the reasons and I do not find any of them acceptable. If a God exists and has the power to create humans, he should intervene and remove unnecessary suffering. So even if I were to believe a God exists, I would not follow the God of the Bible. In reality, I just do not see evidence of it, so I will be a good person going through life without believing. I do not need the prospect of eternity in hell to be the reason I should be good. I treat others how I want to be treated. It is that simple. Story 93. They do not. I am an apostate. I also have the added bonus of not having to communicate with most of my father's family. Story 94. They stopped coming to my house once I put up a no soliciting, religious or others sign in my front window. Story 95. Ignore them. They knock once, and if there is no answer, we receive a leaflet. If we are in an answer, it is a polite no thanks, and they go on their way. There is no need to be rude to someone of a different faith. This is not the Middle East. Story 96. Agree. I mention that we pray all the time. When they bring up a passage, I exclaim what a coincidence that it was the same passage we went through yesterday. They leave quickly and happily with no reason to come back. Story 97. This was 20 years ago. I said, sure, we can talk. And they asked me about God. Then I asked them if they thought Christ would ever shun someone, because I did not think shunning was very Christ-like. They left. I have not seen them since. Story 98. My friend would invite them in, and after 15 minutes of having each of their claims thoughtfully and gracefully refuted, they usually found a reason to excuse themselves and leave. Story 99. I was in the Northeast outside splitting wood when a couple came up to me in winter. I told them I would listen but had to finish splitting. It was about 15 degrees, and I noticed they were wearing thin-soled dress shoes. They started shifting around on the snow after a couple of minutes and kept the conversation very short. Story 100. Place a Bluetooth loudspeaker in the backyard. Yell from inside the house. Front door is stuck. Go to the backyard. Immediately play the loud dogs barking track. Story 101. I am disabled at the time and needed my kitchen cleaned. It worked once, but they have never come back. They do an amazing job cleaning, by the way. Story 102. It is part of their religious belief system. If you want the long version, send me a direct message. Just call the local Kingdom Hall and ask to be put on the do not call list. If it happens again, call them and remind them of your request. This should help end it. Story 103. I asked them to put me on a no-contact list, and so far they have respected my wishes and left me alone. Story 104. My dad once told them, I am not interested in your religion. Before he shut the door fully, one of them said, I feel so sorry for you. I never saw Dad lose his temper so quickly. They ended up running back to the street. Story 105. They know the procedure. They are supposed to leave their address so I can visit them on their day off. Story 106. My aunt was into that and dragged me to one of their meetings. It was the oddest experience of my life. In a basement where, on the wall, was a massive map of the area they lived in, bigger than you might imagine, with pins in it. Very creepy. I treat all religions equally. From my perspective, they are all long-standing cults and should be avoided at all costs. No, I do not answer the door to people promoting these groups. Story 107. Tell them to leave while giving them a look that dares them to try and argue with me. They are usually polite and leave, and that is the end of it. Story 108. I have a sign. It states, "No flyers, politics, religion, or solicitation. Do not ring the doorbell. If you need me, text me. If you cannot text me, please go away. I have a lot of dogs. I do not need random people ringing the doorbell. I have not had a problem since I put it up. Mormons also respect it." Story 109. I hand them a New Yorker magazine from a couple of months ago and tell them that I would like for them to accept the gift of some literature on my beliefs. I would be happy if they wanted to come back and talk about that month's short story, the current offerings on Broadway, or one of the in-depth current event stories. But they need to give their time to something that someone else believes to be fair. Story 110. I have always gone with the approach, "Here, I will read your handout if you read this," offering a convenient pamphlet from the local Catholic Church about the Rosary. I have not seen them in half a decade since they last visited. They mentioned that they cannot read my handouts very well due to an impasse. Story 111. I let them know I am Roman Catholic and that it is pronounced Yahweh, not Jehovah. It is a rude move, but they do not stick around to try and convince me otherwise. Story 112. I just had this happen and politely told them no thanks through the Ring camera. I wanted to tell them to go away because we have a no soliciting sign on our door which everyone seems to ignore. Story 113. The last time, I had been home from the third shift for about an hour. They started ringing the doorbell persistently. I got up, angry, and opened the door. I'm not sure they were prepared for a madman in boxers, but surprisingly they decided it was worth the time. Before they got past the "Have you heard?" I squinted a bloodshot eye and coldly said, "At my church we burn pagans like you," and closed the door. I stood behind the door to see if they had the courage to ring the doorbell again. A glance through the peephole showed two mentally broken people who finally wandered off with confused and shell-shocked looks. They never came back. Story 114. Is there a reason that you would be anything other than courteous? I mean, assuming they arrive at a respectable time during the daylight hours, you do not need to accept their faith. Story 115. Ask if they could help you with some chores first. Then share some food and drink when the chores are complete. Engage in a thought-provoking discussion that involves their religion, focusing on the metaphors and lessons from the scripture rather than a literal interpretation, without stating anything negative about their religion. Story 116. I have a sticker on my mailbox that says, "No religious visits," so I would point to it. It means they are not welcome and would leave. Story 117. Remind them of the sign they are staring at through my doorbell. If they insist, tell them I worship Satan. Sign, "No solicitors." Seriously, please do not make it weird. Story 118. Mainly, I don't answer. However, I have no problem telling them why I am an atheist and that I do not go to people's houses shoving my beliefs on others. Story 119. Either tell them they are early for the goat sacrifice to our Dark Lord or call them soul-soliciting pig offenders. Story 120. If I have some time, I tell them I will talk to them but that I will not convert. I usually give them about 10 minutes. When I am ready for them to leave, I ask them where in the Bible, other than Exodus, are their 10 commandments. They never know, so I tell them it is Deuteronomy, which is true, and that I have run out of time. Then I usher them out of my house. Story 121. I was making beer with a friend at his house when the doorbell rang. While he was talking, I screamed, "I just put in Angel's anal, and the hours are on their way." He was the reddest I have ever seen a person. Story 122. True story. My girlfriend in college jumped due to an unexpected knock on my apartment door. I explained I get two types of visitors: United Parcel Service delivery men and Jehovah's Witnesses. I answered the door. "Sign here, please," said the United Parcel Service guy. Not less than 10 minutes later, guess who knocks on the door? Perfect timing. To answer the original poster, I just politely say I'm not interested. Random safety tip: check your blood pressure. If your resting systolic is consistently averaging above 130, you should talk to your doctor. Story 123. My Polish grandfather used to answer the door for them in his boxers and would invite them in for a beer. Easy to guess how that went. Surprisingly, they visited his house more than once. According to my grandmother, they kept trying to do their part, but he would talk over them to get them inside the house. He was not a great grandfather, but this is one of my favorite stories. Story 124. Personally, as soon as I see the cheap, poor quality office wear and the hopeful, diluted expressions on their faces, I take the pamphlet from them and throw it in the recycling bin. Then, I gently but firmly escort them off my property and explain that from now on their assumed right to enter my driveway has been revoked. I also calmly explain that if they ever disturb my peace again, I will not be as polite next time. Story 125. Ex-Jehovah's Witness here. Decide if you want to have a spiritual conversation. If you are interested in faith and none of your friends are, use this as an occasion to have a nice chat with someone. If you are lonely or elderly and haven't had a conversation with someone in a while, go and talk to them. You can change the subject if you don't like what they begin to talk about. Or open the door, say good morning, but if you are not interested, say have a nice day, and close the door. Or call out, "Not interested. Please leave." I used to do this, and I often had long, pleasant conversations with people who were not interested in joining the faith, or who enjoyed the opportunity to praise their own God by talking to us about him. Also, many elderly people love to visit. It doesn't have to be unpleasant. Story 126. Usually, I politely tell them I am not interested. Occasionally, I say I will listen to their pitch if they listen to me speak about my Allfather Odin One-Eye, king of the Aesir, first. No one ever has. Story 127. One time they pulled up, got out of their car and went to the door. I was mowing and saw them. I pulled my tractor up behind their car. Not a lawn tractor, but a big tractor with a loader. I shut it off and went into the shop. Nobody was in the house, so they came out there. I told them I did not want to talk to them, and they asked if I could move my tractor. I told them I was busy and would get to it in a minute. About 20 minutes later, I came out. They were sitting in their car, just waiting. I moved the tractor out of their way and they left. I have not seen a Jehovah's Witness since. I am probably on their list. I know it seems like a bad thing to do, but they were parked right in my way and I had things to do. They do not, so they can wait. Story 128. Just play Never Gonna Give You Up at the loudest volume you can stand. I have never experienced that, but that is what I would do. Story 129. Bring out a couple of chairs to the front porch and invite them to sit down. I will listen to what they have to say, ask a few questions, and thank them for their time. I have actually done this. I respect our freedom of religion and enjoy listening to them telling me, a secular humanist, how I will go to hell when I die. Lots of fun. Story 130. I grew up on a farm as a child. Visitors had to drive down our driveway, which was about 1 kilometer from the front gate. I remember when they would come, my mother would tell us to hide under our beds. She would peek from a window, and we had to wait there until they left. I used to be terrified of them. Story 131. I just look them squarely in the eyes and say firmly, no. Then I close the door, and they leave me alone for about 6 months, waking me up early and ruining my lie-in, distracting me when I am trying to work, interrupting when I am in a meeting or attending a virtual appointment. I am not likely to react warmly. I actually find them really intrusive, not because of what they say or their insistence, but because they assume they belong in my day, invading my personal and private space, indirectly demanding my attention. I feel annoyed and as if they are trying to dominate my space, which I do not like. I do not let myself express my feelings in those situations. I know they think they are doing the right thing and cannot read my mind or understand that I do not want to talk. So I keep things short and to the point. I believe the more I say, the more they think it is a foot in the door and will try to keep me engaged in conversation. Generally, if you are clear and direct, those who are genuine and respectful will understand and are unlikely to persist week after week. Those who do keep returning frequently are unwilling to listen, which begins to resemble the start of a harassment case. Story 132. Last time it was a father-son team. I ignored the father completely, and to the son I said, "This doesn't have to be your life. You don't have to spend your time talking to strangers trying to convert them to a religion that you know in your heart isn't true. No one from that religion has been to the house in the last 8 years. I have since learned that I have likely been labeled an apostate, which I guess is like the Jehovah's Witness version of Do Not Disturb. They assign it to houses that they think can't be converted or that try to convert them. I have a lapsed Jehovah's Witness friend who told me sometimes that strategy backfires and they send many people to your house because you need major help, but it seems to have worked all right in this case. Story 133. Answer it and tell them to go away. They go. They do not really want to convert you. They just want to do their required duty. I did once chat with some nice elderly ladies when I was home with the children, but really, they mostly want to go home themselves. Story 134. 9 out of 10 times it is 2 women, so I pull a disrespectful move. 1 Timothy 2 verse 12. But I do not allow a woman to teach or to assume authority over a man. She must be silent. Then I just stand there, and they usually leave within 5 seconds. Story 135. I let them know I am not interested as I am Jewish, but I offer them water because it is not their fault they were raised like that. Story 136. If I look through the peephole and it is not the police or someone I know, I just ignore it. Besides, my dog sounds pretty scary. Story 137. Answer the door in my underwear, act excited, and say this. You guys are here early. The swingers party doesn't start for another hour. Story 138. Be a decent human and either do not answer the door or politely decline. Some people in these comments are absolute jerks. Story 139. I just tell them I am not interested and to have a nice day. If they try to keep talking, I say, okay, I have to go now. Goodbye, and close the door. I do not, under any circumstances, accept pamphlets or other materials. Story 140. If I am feeling particularly mischievous, I like to try to convert them to Norse paganism. It has worked once. Story 141. Keep some black candles ready, light them, and welcome them in to worship Abaddon. They usually do not stay and rarely come back. Story 142. Does not matter when, ignore them. I have 2 no soliciting signs at the door, so it is not my fault they wasted their time. Why do they still do that? It seems like the last pandemic would have been a good time to end that practice. Story 143. Before I put up a sign, I dragged my barking dogs away from the door, shook my head, said no, and shooed them away. Story 144. They used to come around a lot before the pandemic. I would offer water but tell them I wasn't interested, ask them to keep the pamphlet and take a few bottles of water with them. Then I moved when things first started opening up again, and I started getting handwritten notes about Jehovah's Witnesses. I didn't think much of it until I received one thanking me for all the water. That was creepy because I had only moved a few months before, and there was a lag time between moving out and new people moving in. I wrote them back a very polite letter, telling them that while I am sure they mean well, this comes off as incredibly creepy and inappropriate, and to cease any further contact by any means. They have adhered to it. Story 145. Put on the most homeless clothes I have and a cowboy hat. Stick my whole hand in a jar of peanut butter, crying, asking if they can help me please, or be naked. Story 146. We are not very religious, but thank you for stopping by. I cannot really be mean because I was raised by Jehovah's Witnesses and had to do the door-to-door activity every weekend. As a super introvert, I hated every second. Story 147. Many years ago, my brother was looking after his young children while his wife was at work. She returned to find them trying to entertain the preschoolers while he watched the game on television. They never returned. Story 148. Last time I answered, I told them that while I am not interested, if either of them ever needs help leaving the church, I would be happy to help. They have not come back. Story 149. Back in my college years, a group of them showed up at my friend's parents' house the morning after a big party. They saw a bunch of us passed out on the lawn along with beer cans and turned right around. I guess we could not be saved. Story 150. If you are not interested, all you have to do is say so. Be kind. They are trying to provide comforting information to many sad people. They do not ask for money. Story 151. Usually, I do not answer. I have a no solicitation sign. Last time, I was really annoyed because I was napping and they knocked and rang the bell twice. I answered the door, pointed to the sign, and said, "When a woman says no, you need to respect that." Story 152. My cousin and I were at Dunkin' one morning, getting ready on our bikes for a trip to South Carolina. A nicely dressed couple walked up and started to compliment our Harleys. The man reached out with a copy of the Watchtower. I looked him in the eye and said, "If you ever approach me again with this nonsense, I will crack your jaw. Now get out of here." My cousin Joe and looked at me and said, "What is wrong with you?" A simple no thank you would have been sufficient. Sorry, Joe. His Dunkin' experience will surely be a memorable one. Story 153. Oof. I am a heating, ventilation, and air conditioning service technician, so I typically work alone, but we had around 25 technicians. There is one man. He is a member of the Jehovah's Witnesses. I do not care, but I typically ask questions about random things and question everything. One day I was chatting with him, and the religion topic came up. This man usually feels guilty if we take a break for 10 minutes. He had me trapped in an attic for over 2 hours talking about this with no escape. He was legitimately blocking the walkway to the hatch to go down, just standing there. Most people who make religion a deep part of their personality are relying on their faith because they no longer feel they can walk on their own 2 feet, or they do not believe they can. For most, religion is a big crutch to fill a void or try to answer an impossible question they once posed, and they cannot be convinced otherwise. I have met many nice Jehovah's Witnesses, but it always goes back to a key life moment why they joined, such as a child getting sick or dying, experiencing rape, molestation, child abuse, or neglect. It is sad, really. Always nice, but never normal. Story 154. I have received a few handwritten letters in my mail. They are very nicely written in cursive. However, I cannot help visualizing people in a windowless basement producing these letters. Story 155. Look at my security camera on my phone. See the 2 nicely dressed people? Ignore it and go back to sleep. Story 156. I had just taken a shower and had a towel on my head to dry my hair. I probably had mascara running down my face. I am not sure why I answered the door, as I would not do that today. I scared them and they went away. Story 157. The last time they came by, I turned on my front sprinklers and drenched them. That was 7 years ago, and they have not come back. Story 158. Depends on my mood. Sometimes I ignore people, sometimes I am rude to them, and sometimes I engage in an argument with them. Story 159. Years ago, where we were living seemed to be a Jehovah's Witness training area. For out of 5 weekends, we would get a visit. My wife and I worked Saturdays, leaving our teenage girls at home. The girls got sick of the repetitive annoyance, and one teenager decided to answer the door in her underwear. This led to an immediate drop in visits. However, there were occasional visits from older women. A couple of years later, the girls told me that they had stopped that by answering the door naked. I am proud of my feisty daughters. Story 160. Told members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints immediately that I have no interest, but they can talk to me if they want. They cleaned my apartment for me. They came back 2 more times and helped clean. Story 161. Easy. Wear my Norse pagan or heavy metal shirt. Non-metalheads. Tell them you are surprised they talk to excommunicated people. They should leave. Story 162. When anyone approaches my front door, I hear a ding-dong on my phone. I click on the video doorbell camera, see them, then ignore. My dog is so smart that when he hears the ding-dong, he knows someone is there. Story 163. I have a no solicitation sign in front of my house so that people can see it and move on their way. Story 164. We have women who sit outside our library every day with signs about Jesus. Wouldn't they be doing more good by making sandwiches for the homeless or helping in some other way? Story 165. I answered the door completely naked on purpose and started doing the helicopter with it while saying gibberish. They never returned or came to my block again. Story 166. Have a pleasant chat and let them share a Bible verse and ask my thoughts about the verses. One of the men was nervous. It was pleasant. I told them that if I joined a church, I was not considering Jehovah's Witnesses. Story 167. I do not answer the door. They will walk away eventually. I already know I am going to say I am not interested, and I do not want to waste my time or theirs. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.